Hi, in this video I'm going to show you how I paint mushrooms using gouache. For this painting I'm using my Stillman and Birn Sketchbook, the beta series, so it's the one with the blue cover. And I use paper clips to clip down the edges to prevent warping or the paper folding up at the corners while I'm painting. One thing I really like about painting mushrooms is that they come in all various shapes and sizes and colors, and it's actually one of my favorite subjects to paint. So I tend to paint a lot of them throughout the year. And the first step of my process is applying gesso. I'm gonna use the Princeton Velvetouch 3/4 inch wash brush to apply gesso to the page. I'm using the Liquitex Basics gesso, and I just tend to squirt it on the page. So I like to put gesso on the page because gouache can be reactivated with water, so it kind of adds an extra layer so that you can paint on the opposite side of the page without disturbing the gouache. So it's just kind of like a thin layer to keep your painting safe. And for this spread, I put way too much gouache down on the left hand side, so I'm just moving it to the right hand side and spreading it all over the page. One thing with gouache is that you want to do a nice even coat so that your painting surface is nice and smooth. And I do this by using the cross-hatching method of painting. So I'm going up and down, left and right, or vertical and horizontally. And I'm just alternating between that to create that fresh, like smooth surface that I'll be painting on. And once I'm done applying the gouache or the gesso, I will let it sit for probably about an hour. I typically only put on one coat and then I start painting. So I've already sketched out my mushroom drawings. I used the Faber-Castell Polychromos colored pencils. And so I do that before I lay down the gouache. Or the gesso, I mean. And for the gouache, I'm using Turner Design Gouache. This gouache is reactivated with water. So my first step basically is deciding what color I want to paint the mushrooms. And for these, I wanted to do a monochromatic look, so I wanted them all to be like yellow. And so you can say that in my sketches where one set's yellow and then I go to red, blue, green, etc. For this one, I'm using Permanent Yellow Deep. It is my main color. I've added some white to this one to lighten it up a little bit and to get that base layer down. I find it easier to always put down a base layer first, and then I will start building out any shadows and highlights after that. So right here I'm starting to build out my shadows, and I'm using Permanent Yellow Deep straight out of the tube, so I'm not adding any white or any other darker color. So you can see it's very faint, but I'm just kind of deciding where those shadows are going to be. And now I'm going in with a yellow ochre, which is a much darker yellow, and I'm using that as the shadow underneath the mushroom cap. So I've kind of decided that underneath the mushroom cap is going to be my darkest color. Now I'm going in with a darker yellow than what I previously laid down with the stem of the mushroom. So I actually mixed permanent yellow deep with the yellow ochre, and I created sort of like a darker yellow, but not as dark as just yellow ochre. And I'm using that as my shadow just to make it darker and stand out more. This is how I paint a lot of the times. I'll start with like one color, and then as I'm painting I change my mind and I decide like it either needs to be darker or lighter, and then I sort of change it in the middle of the process, which is what I'm doing now. And then as I want to create like kind of a stepping path from the lighter yellow to that darker yellow, so I'm creating various colors that are in between those two hues or shades, and I'm slowly adding in more yellow to make the yellow brighter, and I just paint that kind of in the middle as like a layer. I'm not mixing it with water so that the two colors have a smooth transition. It's very painterly how I'm doing it, so you can actually see the brush strokes, but I'm just doing like a stepping path. And so overall, when you look at it, it looks like it's a very smooth transition. And then here I'm going in and adding another layer of that yellow ochre to even darken it a bit more. I tend to do this a lot. You'll see as I paint is I'm constantly kind of changing my colors and changing my mind on the fly just to make the overall image flow and stand out, and just to kind of make it, I don't know, look believable. And that's what I think adding the different shades of the yellow does. It adds, dimension and movement. And right here I'm adding in highlights. So this is like the lightest yellow I'm adding, which I'm adding to the tip of the mushroom cap at the bottom there, where like maybe the highlight you could see, and then my light source is coming from the left, so I'm adding a shade of that's super light to the left hand side to make it stand out more. And then another thing that I really like doing, and this is probably why I really like painting mushrooms, is adding in the details. So I'm just adding in random specks to add in some character to the mushrooms to make them look more realistic and more, I don't know, like detailed. And I think adding in like scuffs and scratches and dots and all sorts of marks to mushrooms make them look a little bit more believable, like they're actual mushrooms out in the wild. And Another thing I do as well is I like to outline my illustrations. I tend to do a various line weight on the line art just to make it more interesting. So like some parts will be fatter than other parts and other parts will be thinner. And also it's too is because I cannot draw a line with the same width at all. So adding the varying width is just kind of natural to me. But I do think it adds more character and interest, and it adds a little bit of movement because it kind of helps lead your eye around the illustration. And that's about all that I have for this painting. Let me know in the comments below what I should paint next, or if you have any questions. Thanks for watching. Bye!